Okay, so let's label actually on those little folded pages. So we're going to write the deep front porch, where you have the two columns, and then the actual like housed sanctuary is called the cella, and that's the main room in a temple where a god is housed. So then since this one has three, this is a triple cella. So form, I wrote my form right below the temple. The three doors represent three gods. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to highlight that. I have a pink highlight. You can barely see the 1, 2, 3 because of the photocopy. These are considered Tuscan columns, right? So we know Doric, hang on a second. All right, so we know Doric has the flat top, and then Ionic has the curved top, and then the Corinthian has the flared top. So this one has the flat top, so it's Doric, except it has a base. It's all about that base. The Doric doesn't have a base, it just goes straight into the platform or straight into the ground. This one has one staircase, which emphasizes the entrance. So it's very different from the Greek Parthenon temple. So overall, you don't have to write all this, but overall, the Tuscan style temple is what we just said. Triple cella, right? So a triad, 3 rooms, sided by a double row of columns on the facade. And facade is a word you're going to start hearing again and again with architecture. It just means the front entrance is the facade. All right, so here's another example of Doric. The column goes straight into the platform versus Tuscan, where it has a base. And then write this on your little plan. The triple cella is 3 rooms and it reflects a divine triad associated with the temple. All right, switch note pages. I want you guys to find the note page that has actually has a Hellenistic Greek piece on the back. It has your Nike of Samothrace on the back. And then on the other side is this Venn diagram where we're going to compare a Greek temple to an Etruscan temple. All right, so Greek temple, this is a review, but I want you guys to write it. So Greek temples are made with stone. They're very permanent. We can still see the Parthenon, even though a lot of it has exploded, but the stones are still there. There's stairs all around. You can get in from multiple points. There are Doric columns on the outside, but then there are still Ionic elements throughout the temple. There's sculptures on the frieze and the pediment. So remember, the pediment is the triangle. The frieze went all the way around, and it was kind of inside, like underneath here, inside that first row of columns. And then this part, the Parthenon, is dedicated to Athena. All right, so let's compare that now to our Temple of Minerva. It is a triple cella, 3 rooms that housed gods. The materials that they used were ephemeral. Ephemeral means it's not going to last forever. They used 1 flight of stairs leading to 1 emphasized entrance. And then part of the benefit of that was that they could view the sculptures that they had on the rooftops. This is considered a Tuscan order, which is the Doric columns with the base. And this is a Temple of Minerva, so this is dedicated to Minerva. And Minerva is the Roman name for Athena. All right, in the middle of the Venn diagram, we're going to put the things they have in common. They are both raised off of the ground, so they both have a platform. We're going to see this in most temples. Yeah. All right, they both are using columns. They both have a pediment, that's that triangular form that's on the top of the temple. And they're both dedicated to the same god, but with different names. All right, let's write some context about Etruscan temples. So early Etruscan worship of gods took place outside. They didn't actually have temples. But then it was because of trading with the Greeks that they started to get more influence from Greek culture. So because of Greek influence, Etruscans began building temples for gods. We already wrote this, you don't need to write it again, but they use ephemeral natural materials, so little survives, right? Makes me think of the 3 little pigs. Which one do you want to use for a house? Which one is going to last? Well, the stone Parthenon lasted, None of these Etruscan temples have actually lasted. Which then the next question, how do we know about them if nothing actually lasted? So there's a Roman architect named Vitruvius. You might know the name, oh, why did it just go away? You might know the name Vitruvius because of the Vitruvian Man, which is on the right. So this is an artwork that Leonardo da Vinci created using the notes of Vitruvius about proportions. All right, so the Roman architect Vitruvius wrote and drew this model. So the model is what we have the picture of. He wrote and drew this model in a book describing elements of Etruscan temples. So it was his description that actually inspired the Renaissance architects to return to the roots of Tuscan design. So when we get back to the Renaissance means rebirth. It's a rebirth of Greek and Roman and Etruscan and all these elements that we're studying right now. And then the foundation, that platform, the foundation of the tufa rock actually still does remain. And then the sculpture, we're going to talk about the sculpture. All right, the rediscovery of Vitruvius's work had a profound influence on architects of the Renaissance, prompting the rebirth of classical architecture in centuries that follow. All right, we did everything for form. All right, we're going to write down a few things about our sculpture, the Minerva. Sculpture of Apollo. Sorry, this is Apollo from the Temple of Minerva. All right, so we already know this. We don't need to write it again, but sculptures were placed on temple rooftops. This is an Etruscan innovation. They're really the only ones that did this. And I mean, it's just crazy because these are huge. This guy is 5'10". That's very large for a sculpture to be on the rooftop. The function of these sculptures, so if you look at the model picture, there's multiple sculptures. So the function was to reenact a mythic event, was one of at least 4 other painted sculptures. And then let's write down form. This, it's Apollo. Yeah, so he was 5'10", and this is painted terracotta. Some of the paint still remains. All right, so we're going to do some comparisons between Innovisius Koros and the Apollo sculpture. So Innovisius Koros, we're going to say is nude because that is different than Apollo. Apollo's clothed. Very static stance, right? Still looks like Egyptian, the Menkaure king and queen. The arms are down at the sides, keeping it more stable and connected. And then this is made out of marble versus the Apollo of Vai, is the actual name of him. The fabric is partially concealing, so some of the body, I guess, is showing through. Forward moving pose, like there's a lot more action taking place in this sculpture. Arms are reaching out, which is why they're gone, and made of terracotta because Etruscans worked mostly in terracotta. All right, what they both have in common, look at that smile. They both have that same little archaic smile. They both have the idealized body, same stylized long braided hair, and then they are both painted. So again, there's going to be questions. How can you see influence of other cultures? How can you see influence of Greek culture on Etruscan culture? You should now have some answers to do some comparisons. All right, so hopefully you wrote that in that comparison section that you have. All right, so we are going to look at a College Board video on how to formulate this in an essay. Okay, so this is a College Board provided video where she's going over art history skills with using essay prompts because part of the test, a big part of the test is writing essays. And I've talked before, there's going to be an essay that discusses continuity, that's tradition, right? How is something continuing or changing? So here's the question. Explain how the design of religious architecture in the ancient Mediterranean demonstrated continuity or change. So it's going to be talking about these 2 temples, but the whole idea here is creating a claim, right? What is your because statement? And then you have to back it up with context. You can't just stake a claim and say this is fact. You have to give other information of how you are coming up with that claim. So that's what she's going to be talking about.
Located on the roof along the ridgepole. Let's go back to our chart. So remember, we're going to choose the Temple of Minerva to answer this prompt, this sample prompt. Now pause here and write a claim, and don't forget your because statement. We talked about that in video 1. So you want to make sure to earn that task point. So you need the because statement. Go ahead and pause here and write your claim. Okay, so maybe you wrote lots of claims, right? Maybe? Okay, at least one, right? Here are 3 claims, well, 3 good claims and 1 not so good claim. Let's take a look at one of the good claims. So the design of the Temple of Minerva demonstrated change because the layout of the temples and the placement of the sculptures differed significantly from the ancient Greeks. But guys, there's more than one way to slice this pizza here, so you don't have to take the same side. Here's another example. The Temple of Minerva was very similar to the design of a Greek temple because it also contained cella for cult statues and architectural sculptures of the gods. Different angle, but we could still defend that. Now, this last statement, not very good. The Temple of Minerva shows a lot of change from Greek architecture. But how? Remember, the prompt says how, so that one is not going to earn a point on there, okay? So now think of some evidence. So pause here and brainstorm evidence. Okay, so remember, you want to think about now if the evidence you brainstormed, if this is supporting, refuting, or modifying the possible position. Let's take this example here, that it differed significantly from the ancient Greeks because of the layout and the placement. Let's read through these 3 pieces of evidence. Okay, and then determine which one supports, refutes, or modifies, okay? So let's start with this one. The Temple of Minerva would have had a cult statue in each cella in continuity with the Greek temples the Etruscans had come into contact with on the Italian peninsula. Is that supporting the idea that it's differed significantly? No, right? That one's refuting. Let's take a look at this next one. The Greeks placed sculptures in the pediments, but the sculptures at the Temple of Minerva were placed on the roof along a ridgepole, which was an Etruscan innovation. That one is supporting. We could use that one in support of this thesis statement. This last one, well, the Temple of Minerva demonstrated change in the layout of the temple. The use of architectural sculpture was similar to the Greek tradition. So that one's modifying or qualifying it a little bit, right? Okay, so here we have our chart. As I mentioned, there's more than one way to approach this essay. Depending on your claim, you want to just make sure that your essay contains that supporting evidence to really prove your case in front of the judge, or in our case, the AP reader, right?